and good evening, everyone, and welcome to Revealing the Secrets of the Rosemarkie Sunfish. I'm your host this evening, Lizzie Daly. Thrilled tonight to be bringing you a special feature as part of the National Museum of Scotland's online series programme. We're sad to not welcome you in person to the museum this evening, but of course it's so wonderful to share this evening with so many of you watching from across the world. There's over 500 of you signed up to this evening's talk, so I can't wait to go on this evening's journey with every single one of you. So thank you for tuning in, and of course tonight's talk is part of a series of talks, so we really hope you enjoy this evening, as well as join us again for more talks about the brilliant collection, the fascinating stories, and the amazing research that goes behind this wonderful collection here. So a few housekeeping rules. If you have any technical issues, please just let us know in the Q&A. We've got a team on hand ready should you have any issues. This event is being recorded, but rest assured your cameras and microphones are off, so you can wander around in your pajamas. You can drink as much wine as you want. No worries, no risks with there at all. This live event is also going to have live captioning. So if you go to the bottom of your screen, you can switch on the menu button, you have CC written there. So if you click that, then your live captioning will be turned on as well. And of course, we want you to get involved. So please get your questions in to us live. This is a really great opportunity to ask our wonderful speakers who I'll introduce to you all shortly some wonderful questions about a wonderful species this evening. So I'm thrilled to be welcoming you all this evening. And of course, all of us watching tonight, we know how diverse and vibrant Scotland's wild spaces and landscapes and coasts and wildlife and seas really are. Scotland is home to over 18,500+ kilometres of wild coastline, and Scotland's seas covers 6 times more than the land area. So it's a really big part of Scotland. As you move offshore from about 20 metres deep, you kind of dive down to 2 kilometres. The seamounts of Scotland dwarf Scotland's highest mountains. So there's a whole sea out there of vibrancy and diversity. Even now we're learning more and discovering new species and new things about our seas every single year, month, day, and last year was no exception. There was a particularly exciting and surprising discovery that washed up on the beaches, actually on the seashore of Rosemarkie last year on the 23rd of September. Rosemarkie is on the Black Isle near Inverness, and this wash-up, this peculiar fish, weighed more than 160 kilograms and came in at a whopping 1.7 meters tall. So pretty big species, and of course it's an ocean sunfish, its scientific name, mola mola. And tonight we're going to be discovering more about this incredible sunfish that washed up in Rosemarkie, as well as learning more about how incredible sunfish really are and what we can learn from studying them. So to kick off this evening, we're going to be playing a short film that was shot on site at the National Museum of Scotland and at the Collections Research Centre. So take a look at this.
On the 23rd of September 2020, a strange fish washed up on the seashore at Rosemarkie on the Black Isle near Inverness. Weighing more than 160 kilograms and measuring 1.7 metres tall, it was an ocean sunfish. I'm Andrew Kitchener. I'm the Principal Curator of Vertebrates at National Museum of Scotland, and an important part of my role is to add specimens like the sunfish to our collections for research. But what is an ocean sunfish? Well, the ocean sunfishes are the world's heaviest bony fishes. There are 5 species found in the world's tropical and warm temperate oceans. The largest ocean sunfishes ever recorded were 4.3 metres tall, 3.3 metres long, and weighed more than 2.3 tonnes. Ocean sunfishes get their name because they're often seen sunbathing at the surface of the sea. Their scientific name is mola mola, and mola means millstone in Latin, reflecting their roundish shape. This huge ocean sunfish behind me is actually a life-size model in the National Museum of Scotland. It's made of fiberglass, but it's very realistic. It's as big as the biggest ocean sunfishes ever recorded. You can almost imagine it swimming off. We have this old taxidermy specimen of an ocean sunfish. It was caught more than 100 years ago in the South Atlantic. It's actually very hard to preserve the thin skin of the sunfish for taxidermy, so even though this is a real specimen, it looks nothing like the living animal. In fact, this is a bump-headed ocean sunfish, which is the largest species in the world. Ocean sunfishes don't live in Scottish seas all year round, but they do turn up in the warmer waters of the North Atlantic current each summer. The National Biodiversity Network has records of 171 ocean sunfishes, mostly stranded on the west coast of Britain. Normally found in open oceans, ocean sunfishes don't do very well in shallow seas, and they often end up stranded on the seashore, just like the Rosemarkie sunfish. By collecting this sunfish for the museum's collection, we can find out a lot more about it.
Brilliant to see that sunfish in action there as well. So I'd love to now introduce you to our two speakers this evening. Of course, first Andrew Kitchener, who you just saw in that video, Principal Curator of Vertebrates in the Department of Natural Sciences. And we're also joined by Georg Hantke, Curatorial Preparator this evening. So hello to you both.
Good evening, great to see you.
It's so good to have you here. Big titles, big roles. Andrew, we'll come to you first. Obviously, we learn a little bit about what you do in that video and about sunfish, but what does your role involve?
Well, it's lots of different things. So as well as organising the collecting of animal specimens for the collections, I work on exhibitions. So that's coming up the ideas for them, sourcing the animals, writing all the text. It's a very busy job. I'm also involved in research as well, wide variety of different research, and also public engagement like this evening. So talking to people and, telling everybody about what we do.
Brilliant stuff. And Georg, you also have quite a diverse role as well.
Yeah, I do. Well, I do work for Dr. Andrew Kitchener, and my role is, well, I'm actually the lucky one. My role includes the collecting of those specimens for our research collection, the preparation and basic creation of those animals. If it's, well, any animal with a backbone, if it's a fish, reptile, amphibian, if it's a bird or a mammal.
So do you spend a lot of your time in the field and also kind of in the museum as well, or is it a mix? What's your kind of day-to-day?
Sadly, not as much as I would like to. I mean, I do spend a fair amount of time in the field. As I said, I'm the lucky one because my job is to travel around collecting all these animals, not just from Scotland, but from all over the world, prepare them on site, return the specimens to this country, and then prepare them for our research collection. So I would say it's about maybe 70–80% in the lab and 20%, maybe 30% in the field, depending on the season. And
Georg, in the short amount of time that I've got to speak to you and learn about what you do, you collect a variety of species. Can you tell us kind of what kind of things you do collect?
Oh God, oh God, oh God. Well, the last few years, I spent much of my time collecting marine mammals. So we do work closely with the Scottish Marine Animal Restranding Scheme, and every single time they report is stranding anywhere around Scotland, I try to be there as long as we have time and money to actually go there. I try to go there, pick up the specimens, maybe process them on site, maybe help the pathologist return them. But it's not just this. I mean, marine mammals are approximately maybe 30% of my time, and the rest is mainly mammals, a few birds. This could be tigers, there could be mountain hare, there could be shrews, there could be anything in your mind. I collected. And then a few years ago, I also had the chance to actually set up my own office in Mexico, where I actually concentrated on reptiles and amphibians. So I do undertake field studies in Mexico, collecting reptiles and amphibians and freshwater fish, and also return those ones to the National Museum of Scotland.
So a variety of species then, I think it's fair to say. Absolutely brilliant. And Andrew, this might seem like a bit of an obvious question, but why were you and George involved in collecting the sunfish? I understand there's lots of different kind of parties and bodies to consider in something like this, but what's your role there?
Yeah, well, obviously, we've been working with the Scottish Marine Animal Stranding Scheme since its inception, actually, back in 1992. So we have a very good working relationship with them, and they record the strandings, but also investigate the causes of deaths. And of course, when a small sunfish turn up all the time, but a really massive one like this is a great rarity, and so we don't actually have a big ocean sunfish in the collection. So it was something that we were very keen to collect and have preserved so that we could study it, and we could also make it available for researchers who visit our collections from all around the world.
So quite an exciting find then, and also a large sunfish, right? I mentioned the size of it there, but that must have been quite exciting to see.
It was, and also to get this very privileged opportunity to look inside, which we'll see later.
Yeah, I'm really excited to go on to that, because obviously we do learn so much from that exterior, but so much can be learned from what you guys do. George, you talk a little bit about kind of you all your roles, multifaceted, but what is the procedure for restranding when you get on site?
Well, first of all, the procedure for stranding it really depends on if the animal is actually still alive or not. So if the animal is alive, we actually have nothing to do with that. The first thing people should do is phone up the BDMLR, informing them of a live stranding. They will be at the scene. And then, because they are marine mammal specialists, they will deal with the situation on site. If the animal should die, it's usually SMAS. There's people from the Scottish Marine Animal Stranding Scheme are being called. Pathologists are on site. They will call us. They will call me. I will follow, and then usually what happens, it depends on where the animal is stranded. If it's near a city, a town or so on, of course the animal has to be removed as soon as possible because it's a biohazard. I mean, we're talking here from maybe 100 kilos to several tons, maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 tons of possibly hazardous carcasses. And so quite often we are well, if we're, for example, on the West Coast, we quite often get opportunity to dissect specimens on site, maybe bury the remaining soft tissue and return the skeleton and then certain samples to National Museum of Scotland. While, for example, if something like that happens on the east coast of Scotland, where there are more cities, more villages, more towns, we usually try to find the fastest way of removing such carcasses, burying them, getting them to landfill sites, maybe dissecting them later on landfill sites. But yeah, first thing is always removing the carcass as soon as possible.
And what I find so fascinating about your roles is it's a really important connection. Obviously, a stranding is not always, it's quite unfortunate to see, but there's so much you can learn in the short amount of time that kind of you have with those carcasses, and then taking those samples and building those connections between what you have on the beach and the ecology and the behavior of that animal and everything and its life history is absolutely fascinating. And for an animal like a sunfish, I've got to say, in the small amount that I know about sunfish, they are fascinating. To have an animal like that wash up at Rosemarkie is really exciting. A bizarre, a wonderful, incredible creature. And we've actually got another short clip to show you here, just to kind of show you and tell you more about this brilliant sunfish and to inspire you. So here's another little clip from Andrew.
It's unusual for ocean sunfishes to turn up in the North Sea. They normally live in warmer waters of open oceans where they can dive down to more than 800 meters searching for food. But why is the ocean sunfish so strange? It has this large rounded body with these tall, pointed dorsal and ventral fins and a tiny mouth and big eyes. It doesn't have a tail, instead it has a clavus which is formed from its dorsal and ventral fins and which acts like a rudder. We don't really know why sunfishes have their strange shape, but it's probably linked to the fact that they swim in this peculiar way by waggling their dorsal and ventral fins from side to side. They get their name from sunbathing at the surface of the sea, which is thought to help them warm up after a very long deep dive in cold waters, but it also may attract seabirds and fishes which pick off their irritating parasites. Ocean sunfishes feed mainly on jellyfish and other jelly-like animals, but they can also feed on small fishes, crustaceans, and other invertebrates, especially when they're young. Ocean sunfishes produce up to 300 million eggs each time they spawn. The fish fry when they hatch out are only 2.5 millimeters long, but they grow very quickly. Ocean sunfishes live for about 20 years, and from its size we know that the Rosemarkie sunfish was 4 years old. The ocean sunfish has more than 50 different species of parasite, both on the inside and the outside. This is unusual, and we don't know why they have quite so many parasites. For example, we found sea lice on the skin of the Rosemarkie sunfish.
$300 million eggs. This kind of facts that just blow your mind.
No, that's completely wrong. I've found out recently that that was just a tiddler. That was of a 1.5 meter long sunfish. They counted the eggs in a 2.2 meter long one, and there were 874 million eggs. So that is really extraordinary.
Goodness. And isn't it the most laid eggs of any vertebrate or something?
Yeah.
It's just phenomenal animal. So, okay, let's learn more about it then. Okay, firstly, Andrew, I'll come to you. Why did the sunfish end up in the North Sea then? You talk about its distribution, but why is it in Rosemarkie?
Well, I think it was just on its sort of summer holidays coming across the North Atlantic current, staying in the warm water. And for whatever reason, it just went a bit too far. And of course, the North Sea is quite shallow and it's not very wide. And of course, once they run into land, yeah, that's it. Curtains, I'm afraid. It's very sad, but it did provide a very exciting opportunity for us.
Yeah, and of course, for those who have seen them in the water and that kind of brilliant sunbathing behaviour, can you tell us more actually about their behaviour generally? Because we do see them in this kind of inactive period of their lives, but do they actively swim?
They do actively swim, and of course they normally swim quite slowly, but even so they cover 20 or 30 kilometers a day. But if they have to get a bit of a move on, they can move at 2 meters a second, which is pretty fast indeed. And as I said in the clip, you know, they can dive down to incredible depths in order to find their food, and you know, it's very exciting. And as I said in the clip, also the juveniles have this very mixed diet, but the adults have this, you know, jelly-like diet, which of course is very low in energy, but being large, they don't need huge amounts of energy to keep them going. So and this abundant jelly-like food is obviously what they thrive on.
And what would actually have caused it to strand then? You talked about a number of factors, but is there a specific reason?
Well, I mean, we couldn't see any evidence that there was anything particularly wrong with it. I think it just got into shallow water and into difficulty. And in fact, inside its gills, we found that there was a lot of sand which had accumulated. And of course, if it couldn't breathe, it's really in trouble.
Yeah. And George, you've worked in these waters for quite a while. What kind of normal marine life would you see in the North Sea, and it's typical of these areas?
Well, to be absolutely honest, for most of the time, you don't really see anything because the North Sea is quite cloudy. But I mean, North Sea is one of the best studied seas actually on our planet. For example, the Dogger Bank, you know. For most of the time, actually, the really interesting parts aren't actually marine mammals or fish. They're actually polychaetes, also lots of worms, lots of marine invertebrates. This is actually what the North Sea is famous for. But probably for most people, what they're actually expecting and also able to see are our large marine mammals. I mean, it was just a few weeks ago, we had humpback whales just outside Edinburgh. Last week, we had a sei whale. There were killer whales swimming around. We have, I think, 25 or 26 marine mammals swimming in the North Sea. So there's plenty of life around.
Yeah, to say the least. It's absolutely brilliant. You just can't underestimate these seas. And Andrew, how kind of different, you talked about the different species of sunfish, but how do they vary, and kind of what other fish are similar in anatomy and their general physical appearance?
Yeah, well, there are 5 species of sunfish, and there's, in fact, one of those is only recognized about 3 years ago as a new species. So and that's called the hoodwinker sunfish. And the three largest species all look fairly similar to each other, and they're just minor variations. And then there's the sharp-tailed sunfish, which, as its name suggests, has a little sharp bit to its tail. And then there's the slender sunfish, which is a much smaller species. So that's a very small family, only 5 species in it, but it's part of this much bigger group, which includes things like the pufferfishes, the triggerfishes, filephishes, boxfishes, and so on. And these have all quite similar structures of their jaws. And of course, pufferfishes are famous for inflating their bodies to avoid being predated upon. But of course, sunfishes can't do that.
Yeah, no, of course.
So,
The one thing that they can do that I read, and correct me if I'm wrong, but can jump up to 10 feet. Is that correct? They can reach.
yeah.
This is just what an amazing species. I actually read this article that once a sunfish landed on a small child off of the coast of Pembrokeshire, I believe, absolutely fine, minor injuries. But, you know, for an animal that heavy and that large, obviously not something to expect the family on a day out on a boat. But can you tell us more about, you mentioned the parasites earlier, which I thought was quite interesting. Can you talk to us more about what some of those kind of removal behaviours and if it's irritating at all for?
Again, I've got an update on that. I think it's well over 70 species of parasites found in and on sunfishes. So they're terribly plagued by these things. But obviously, these parasites, the external parasites, can be very irritating. And so some people have actually observed them sort of cozying up to seabirds like albatrosses and also getting close to fish so that they'll actually pick these things off. And so it must be a huge relief to them. I guess, you know, they haven't got any hands to scratch themselves. So
no fingers to
no
pull
fingers,
them off
no fingers.
And George, is it fair to say therefore that the sunfish is one of the least understood species? I mean, having them here is absolutely brilliant, and Rosemarkie is fantastic, but there's still so many misconceptions around the species as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I wouldn't say it's one of the least studied or least understood species on planet, because I mean, every single day, you know, people are discovering new species, and for sure they're even less known. But the thing is, just the second you actually move away from something normal, there are so many things still undescribed, so many things still unknown, no matter what you actually do. If you describe just the stomach contents, for example, it was my very first sunfish too. I dissected, and I've heard of you know, sunfish being the most parasitized fish on planet, but I've never seen it. And you know, every single cut you took, you saw new worms emerging from its bowels. It was unbelievably fascinating, really fascinating, something I would have never expected. And I've had thousands of animals under the knife. So yeah, it was an opportunity. It really was.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, of course, so much can be learned from studying the exterior of the fish, but to really understand a species, a lot of that information can come from dissection. So the next film that we're about to show you does contain some graphic images and a brief footage of a sunfish dissection, which is brilliant. But if you are a little bit squeamish, take the time to get your questions, the next 3 minutes, any questions or comments that you have, put it in the chat and I'll make sure I get to them at the end of the talk. So take a look at this.
So the Rosemarkie sunfish has given us a rare opportunity to look at the internal anatomy of this strange fish. So what we've done is remove the skin from one side of the body so we can take a peek inside. The ocean sunfish has a very large eye. This one is about the size of an orange. And they swim in the open ocean and they can dive down to more than 800 meters in order to search for food. They need these large eyes in order to see in the darkness of the deep ocean. The ocean sunfish's skin appears to be quite rigid, but in fact it's very thin. But underneath the skin there's this white layer which is the capsule, and this is quite stiff. And it acts like an external skeleton. So even though the sunfish has an internal skeleton like other fishes, it needs this external skeleton for its swimming muscles to push against in order to waggle its fins from side to side when it's swimming. The ocean sunfish has a tiny mouth which is lined with tiny sharp teeth which it uses to grab hold of jellyfish. Its intestines were about 6 meters long and there was lots of digested food inside them, but no undigested items except for a couple of pieces of seaweed. But there were hundreds of very thin worms, more parasites plaguing the poor sunfish. This is one of the Rosemarkie sunfish's gills, and these occur in a chamber, and it has a single opening to the outside through which all the water passes from over the gills to outside the body. And we actually found some parasites, some sea lice, infesting these gills. In fact, you can see one here. And the sea lice have a profound effect on the structure of the gills. You can see how it's changed the shape of the gill filaments here. Because of its unusual shape, some of the ocean sunfish's internal organs are in unusual places. For example, its kidneys are just up behind its head. The Rosemarkie sunfish's liver weighed a massive 10 kilograms. And unlike other fishes that have a swim bladder which they can use to adjust their buoyancy, some fishes have to rely on their oily liver, just like sharks and rays, and also on the capsule, which helps make them neutrally buoyant. Although it's a bony fish, the ocean sunfish's skeleton is mostly made up of cartilage, which is the same material that our noses and ears are made out of. Cartilage is a light material which helps also to keep it very buoyant, just like the skeletons of sharks and rays. Some fishes actually have very few bones in their skeleton. At National Museum Scotland, we have more than 200,000 vertebrate specimens in our collection, and these include skins and skeletons, eggs and nests, wet specimens and tissue samples, and fossil and archaeological remains. We keep adding to our collections to reflect today's environment so that researchers can look back into the past to see how species and habitats have changed over time. There's never been a more important time for us to keep developing our collections, as increasingly our activities threaten biodiversity worldwide. Our collections are a vital tool for biodiversity conservation.
Fascinating stuff there. So, George, tell us more about the stomach contents. Had it had enough to eat, and could you tell that from the dissection?
Oh God, yes, it definitely did had. I mean, it wasn't the most pleasant thing to dissect, to be honest. It was fascinating, unbelievably fascinating, but yeah, no, it was well fed. Having said so, probably half of the stomach contents was nothing but worms. Not worms. The fish actually digested, just parasites living inside its intestines. What exactly it ate, I wasn't able to say, just because it was so well digested. It was just this massive lump of goo, but it was it was pretty well filled. I mean, I saved it. It's fixed. We still have to analyze it, and we still have to put something under the microscope to actually figure out exactly what it is. We found a couple of pieces of seaweed. There was also, I'd like to say, there was also a crab leg within between.
Okay.
But yeah, except from that, this is.
It was an opportunity, as you would say, George, an opportunity. Yeah. Had it ingested any plastic? Obviously, plastic bags look like its primary food source, jellyfish.
No, I did not see any plastic whatsoever inside its stomach, which is, nowadays you really have to say, yeah, it was a good find not to have that.
Yeah, of course, because I mean, I'm sure many of the species that you see in the strandings that you find is lots of plastic bag content inside the stomach. So I think there was one in 2015 of a Cuvier's beaked whale that had 4 kilograms of plastic bag. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. In fact, actually, so far we process approximately 70 whales and dolphins a year, and many of them have plastic inside the stomach, or even ropes, fishing hooks, fishing nets. I mean, we had several meter long fishing nets found inside the stomachs of certain whales. However, for example, the Cuvier beaked whale from 2015 was actually the only animal that died because of the impact of the plastic inside the stomach. So while most other animals, well, many animals had plastic inside their stomachs, it didn't really cause the death of the animal. For sure, it weakened the animal, which is, which is part of its death. But the Cuviers from 2015 from Isle of Skye was the only animal, the only whale, at least in Scottish waters, and ever since I joined the museum, that actively died because of the plastic inside the stomach.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And we've got audience questions flying in, so I want to go on to them very shortly. But before I do, Andrew, when we talk about threats and impacts of plastic, but what are the main threats to Scotland's amazing marine life and species like sunfish?
Well, as George has mentioned, there's lots of human effects, like ghost fishing gear and so on, where marine mammals are getting caught. But there's pollutants, there's toxic chemicals. For example, we've got the skeleton of Lulu, the killer whale, who had this astronomical levels of PCBs in her blubber, and this almost certainly prevented her from reproducing. And and there's kind of physical ship strikes as well on marine mammals as well. So there's terrible things can happen out there, but I think it's very important that we keep collecting these animals and investigating what's going wrong with them, and also preserving their remains so that we can actually look back and take samples from them and find out more about their ecology.
Yeah, absolutely. Multifaceted, obviously, some of these issues. Right. We've got lots of questions coming in, so I'll be quite keen to get them over to you now. We have first question, Elliot in Fortrose. Was the sunfish male or female? Good question.
It was a male.
Boom. On to the next. Okay, now how do you tell the difference between a male and a female sunfish?
You open it up and you look for eggs, for roe or for testes.
Yeah. There we are. So it's not externally visible.
No. It's only internally.
No baculums in sunfish then?
No baculum, no penis bone.
Got it. Okay, we'll move on. How do they eat from Jude, age 7?
Andrew?
Well, that's interesting. Well, they have a kind of beak-like jaws, which obviously they can slice bits off, I guess. And then behind that, they've got these tiny teeth, which they're named after millstones, but it's a bit like a mill. They actually can grind things up into a very fine residue, which is presumably what we found in the guts of the animal.
So that kind of mouth position, it's always looking a little bit in shock, but that beak does actually open and close and help digest that, or is that just for gripping the jellyfish?
Yeah, I guess it. I've never actually watched the sunfish feeding, but I'm guessing so.
That's one for the next BBC documentary, an hour of sunfish eating, maybe not. Okay, a question from Katie O'Neill. You mentioned that sunfish come inshore seemingly by mistake, but they tend to arrive in the summer months along with the jelly blooms. Is it not likely that they just follow the prey source? Good question.
Could well be, yeah, absolutely. But jellyfish don't have much control about where they go either. So we see lots of those stranded on the shore as well.
Absolutely. And in those summer months, George, do you find species that kind of may come inshore due to feeding on plankton blooms, etc.? Do they come in more in those summer months?
In the
summer months.
In the summer months.
More stranding?
Sorry for that.
Yeah.
I just didn't.
No, it's okay. It's my Welsh. It's fine.
Well, there is an increase in certain species during the summer months. Yes. I wouldn't say fish. For me, fish. This is just they can turn up at any time, at any place, anywhere on planet. But definitely with marine mammals, there are certain species that actually do visit Scotland during the summer months, and then of course every animal. We have to accept that every animal will die, and if they just have to happen, or if they just die one day here, well, if we're lucky enough, we get to see them.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you both. A question from Sophie and Jake Percival. If I said your name right, hopefully. Can sunfish have babies? We've answered this, but just in case they missed it, Andrew.
Yes, they can have lots of them.
Millions
at least up to 847 million, which is extraordinary. But obviously, not all of those survive, unfortunately. But that's just the way of it.
But come on, it must be just, how is that evolved? Hedging your bets on an epic scale. But how many of those would successfully turn into baby sunfish?
I have no idea. I don't think anybody would know, but it must be a small fraction.
Yeah, I mean, when people have to understand, in order to keep the population stable, let's say 800 million eggs are laid, 2 fish have to reach adulthood and have to be able to reproduce, and the rest must die. If the rest would survive, well, there wouldn't be enough ocean left for all the fish.
But what is extraordinary is how fast they grow. So they're going from 2.5 millimeters up to meters long, and it's sort of 60 million times bigger than when they hatch out of the egg, which is extraordinary.
Yeah, when I was reading about this, there was a comparison to human developmental growth, and they said it would be the equivalent of a baby growing to the size of 6 Titanics in the same amount of time, which I love. I just love that. We like to have comparisons, don't we? So, brilliant. Oh, thank you both. That's great. Okay, a question from Laura Carroll says, are sunfish victims of ingesting plastic bags mistaken for jellyfish, which are so lethal to turtles?
Yes, I believe they can be, and also lots of microplastics have been found in them as well. So it's just like any other marine life that feeds, and I guess it's unavoidable these days.
Yeah. Are we aware of the impacts of plastics on sunfish yet, or is this still an area of kind of new research?
I don't know. I think it's probably, we're all finding out much more about plastics in the oceans and their impacts, and it's probably still very much early days.
Yeah, I think this is also the reason why we have to continue collecting these things, because there are literally just not enough samples available.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's an ongoing issue. Oh, okay. Gosh, so many questions. Thank you all so much for keep sending them in. We'll try and get through as many as we can. Anonymous, I thought their name was Anon, but it's Anonymous, says, do sunfish have any predators?
Oh yes, things eat them. Sharks and other predatory fish eat them, but people eat them as well. And there are fisheries for them. But of course, they're also accidentally caught as well as part of the fishing industry. So there are accidental captures as well.
I read that in Japan just a few decades ago, they actually were considered a bit of a kind of prized delicacy, and you could actually pay off your taxes with a sunfish. Wow. So there we are. I'm not sure you can do that now, but don't try it, whatever you do. Dougal Kennedy says, has the sunfish got smooth or rough skin? George?
Rough skin. It felt like sandpaper.
Really?
I mean, of course it's smooth, otherwise it wouldn't be the most perfect feature for the creature living in water. But yeah, it felt like sandpaper. It's not like shark skin, but yeah, definitely like sandpaper. It was odd. It was literally just odd, like a rough leather belt.
It's really good for parasites to grip onto, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's just perfect for parasites to grip onto.
We actually have a parasitologist listening tonight, very interested in the parasite aspect of it. Sonia Rukert, I hope I said your name correctly. She said, did anybody look at the parasites of the Rosemarkie sunfish at all?
Not yet, but I've had, sorry, Andrew?
You carry on.
No, so far not. I've had several requests from several people. They wanted samples of the parasites, but due to the pandemic and rules and regulations, none of them have been set out yet.
Okay, so we're looking forward to discovering even more about the sunfish. I mean, this is very much the preliminary stage. There's lots more to discover as we get samples and the parasites analysed over time.
Yeah, brilliant. There's maybe a space for Sonia to get in touch and get involved.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another question from Lucy Mussett, who says, are you aware of any myths or folklore about sunfish?
Never heard anything.
No, nothing.
Nothing. They're just giant heads that float around the ocean.
But I'm sure that's it. They're big heads that float around. I mean, it's extraordinary that this anatomy is so weird. It's like having your head pushed into your chest cavity almost, and then all your internal organs pushed up into the chest cavity. And I mean, how does that work? I mean, but then it's just completely crazy.
And even weirder, Andrew, the chest is actually there where our buttocks is. I mean, the ribs are down at where the pelvis should be. This is just It's weird.
And there's I love the different variations of names in different languages of sunfish. So in German, what's Schwimmendekopf, meaning swimming
No,
head?
we actually call it the moonfish.
Do you really? You call it
moonfish.
Really? Someone's actually just asked. Crawford Johnston said, "Are sunfish related to moonfish?"
The very same.
The literal same species. I love it. Brilliant. Okay, thank you, Lucy, for your question. We couldn't help, I'm sorry, on this occasion. You'll have to, the mystery of the sunfish goes on. A question from Linda Gilpin, who said, what hunts or eats sunfish? So what are the predators? You mentioned sharks.
Yeah, I have to confess, I don't know a lot about the predators of sunfish, but yeah. I guess I bet killer whales have a go at them as well if they get the chance. Yeah.
Yeah, I also read a little bit on that and found it fascinating that apparently orca and sharks do, orca in particular, do tear them up, don't eat them at all, and just leave them, which is very wasteful. But yeah. I guess the orca of the world have tend to do that. Okay.
Entertainment for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, Clive Green, who asks, do we know what percentage of that huge number of eggs reach maturity? This is kind of following on from what we're talking about. George, what do you reckon?
0.0001%.
Really?
Yes.
Oh,
it has to. Again, if 10% of all the eggs would actually hatch and then reach maturity, we would have more sunfish than herring in the sea.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay. Well, if you think about a pair of sunfish have only got to replace themselves to have a stable population. So only 2 out of 847 million eggs from one spawning needs to survive during its lifetime.
Yeah.
How is that? Sorry, but how has that been selected for then? Because surely at some point, at 1 million, they'd go, oh, right, that's enough eggs for now.
Well, I suppose it's fortunate for some fishes there are so many eggs, so they can keep replenishing themselves. But it is a threatened species, regarded as vulnerable, so we can't take anything for granted. But I guess the fry are just tiny, floating around in the sea, and their chances of surviving must be very, very small. They just get eaten by something else at all stages of their life.
There's the answer to your question. Who predates on them? Probably every single marine species bigger than they.
Yeah, absolutely. Fascinating stuff. Okay, we've got time for just 2 more questions. A lovely question here from Terry Khan. I have seen and photographed sunfish raising their mouth above the sea and spitting a stream of water. What is going on there?
They're rude.
Very rude.
No idea. Never heard of it.
Idea.
Never seen it.
No, but it's good to hear that they're.
That's an interesting behaviour. Could it be something to do with cleaning out any food? Maybe, is there any part of the jellyfish they wouldn't want to eat? They could expel from their mouths, maybe?
It's possible. They sometimes hone in on the most nutritious parts of a jellyfish. So I guess if there's bits that they don't fancy, they might spit them out, I guess.
Interesting. It's an area of research for anyone else listening who wants to get involved.
Do they have taste buds? Yeah. Is this?
I don't know. Do they?
I cannot imagine.
Brilliant. There we are, Terry. So that's the beauty of even a conversation like this. There's still so much more to learn. It's such a brilliant species. So a question to be answered later down the line, Terry. And last question from Amberley, who's coming in from Ladybank, age 9. What was the oldest sunfish ever recorded? Do we know?
Oh, that's a very difficult question. I mean, people have suggested they live sort of several decades long, but some research done by some Japanese researchers on animals kept in an aquarium where they could measure them as they grew, estimated that by the time they reached fully adult size, they're about 20 years old. And they didn't seem to think they lived much longer, but of course they could do. So we don't really know.
Okay. Well, that's all we've got time for this evening, but kind of before we wrap up, is there anything else, George, if you'd like to add to kind of everyone watching and listening tonight?
Please keep on recording. Please keep on collecting. Please keep on reporting whatever you find. Seriously, it is. I mean, I don't really have much to say about the sunfish itself. The only thing I just really want to get out there is that we need the help from every single person out there in Scotland to actually report every single specimen found, because, you know, the more specimens we get, the more data we have. And at the end of the day, it may sound a little bit cruel, but a dead specimen tells us actually more than, or in many cases, more than live animals. We actually learn more of a species when having a dead animal than a live one.
And Andrew?
Yeah, well, we're very fortunate. We have now have one of the largest marine mammal collections in the world, and we want to keep on adding to that. Yeah. But I wanted to make a special thanks to Mike Johnson, who I think has joined us this evening. We've really enjoyed his fabulous underwater photographs and video of the sunfish, which you've seen this evening on frequent occasions. And I'm also really grateful to the SeaWorld and Busch Gardens Conservation Fund, who've supported George's fieldwork to go out and collect these whales all around Scotland, because without that support, we just wouldn't have this fabulous collection that he's made over the last few years.
Well, it's absolutely brilliant to get a tiny insight into both of your jobs, your roles, significant roles. So a massive thank you to you both for this evening, and for everyone else as well who's actually tuned in this evening, sent in your brilliant questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get them to them all. They were flying in, but please do reach out on social media. You can follow the National Museum of Scotland social media and maybe follow up on questions on there. It would be really great to kind of follow up this conversation. And just a massive thank you, of course, to the National Museum of Scotland themselves. Remember, this year is Scotland's Year of Coasts and Waters, and I think for many of us watching, we've been inspired by the sunfish and by tonight's discussion, and would love to get involved. So the museum is actually reopened to the public. You can actually visit the exhibition on Scotland's precious seas there. Head to the website to learn more about that. And actually, after tonight's talk, the museum will actually be in touch with a short survey. This is great for a number of reasons. You can help shape the future of talks like this one. You can get sign up to the newsletters, which will help notify you on when there are talks just like this one. And on the 7th of July, there's a really exciting event all about cryoarcs, so the biobanks of frozen animal material. And we're going to learn more about museums and zoos and how they're helping to conserve endangered species with cryoarcs. So that's definitely not one to miss. And finally, on behalf of the National Museum of Scotland, just a massive thank you to everyone who donated as well. Obviously, as a charity, donations make up a huge part of keeping this remarkable collection alive and incredible talks like this alive. So massive thank you. If you're able to this evening, please do consider making a donation. Details of how you can actually do that will appear on the screen very shortly. Once again, a massive thank you to Andrew and George, and we'll see you all very soon. Thank you. Goodbye.
Okay, bye.